let us remember Franz Ferdinand, our friend Franz. Okay, so Germany, remember, united 1871. Austria kind of came in after. Italy, okay. And then we have France here. Little Switzerland in the middle. We've got Belgium here. We're going to have the Netherlands up here. Dutch is the way we'll refer to them, right? And you have Denmark. This is a terrible, it's not to scale. We have England here, Spain here, Ireland here, because I like Ireland. Exactly. And then we have Greece here. And then on this side, there's this big Black Sea over here. And so this is Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. It comes around here. And then North Africa pops up like this. And then there's here. You go here, there's Saudi Arabia, Persian Gulf. Okay. So you just make sure you understand this is lake water. Right? There is parts of Greece here, Ireland here, Sicily here, Ireland here, islands all over the place. Okay. So there's stuff here. I made Italy huge, but that's okay. You'll get the point. Okay. There is a Nile here. There is Mesopotamia. Okay. So Russia is over here. Now, there are, and it's different, just a bunch of little countries between Russia and Germany. Okay. Not as many as this, but you get the point. At one point, Ottoman Empire really stretched into this area at one point. They had most of the area north of Greece. At one point, they were pushing right up to Austria. At one point, Austria had most of this area right next to the Ottomans. In other words, they were kind of next to each other. And at one point, remember, they had much of what would be normally Germany. But they didn't join with Germany. Germany, their old name, do you remember what their old name was? Prussia. Germany was really, it was like a province of this German confederacy long time ago, back in the 1700s, 1600s. It was just one. Bavaria is another province. It wasn't Germany. Austria had the crown, the Holy Roman Empire, right? So they were supposed to be the one that had more leadership. But the fact is, being old sometimes means that you lose that leadership. And in fact, both of these cases is what we see. The Ottoman Empire begins to lose its power. It goes backwards. Let's see if I can get you a yellow. I don't have it. Yeah, there it is. It goes kind of there you go. It goes back. It retreats. And so that this is now the new border. But it used to be up here. Similarly, the Austrian also had kind of a bad state of things. They also retreated. And so then what happens to all these little countries in between? They weren't there in 1800. It's split off. Well, they're not owned really either by Austria or the Turks. They have a much heavier influence by the Austrians because that's where they've been. But the Turks also have had influence there. These countries are all kind of intertwined. Russia wants to go through. Russia's only access to warm water is up, give it a green. No, give it a purple. That's the only access they have to a port. And Russia wants to be industrialized. Remember, we talked about industry. You have to be able to trade around the world. Well, their only connection is through the Baltic Sea. And the Baltic Sea is frozen 6 months out of the year. In fact, the movie Frozen is about these people. That's where it's at, right? So it's frozen 6 months out of the year. Russia really wants to be part of the industrial world, and so its main goal in life is to try as best as it can to push this way. Because if it can do that, then it can have access to the Mediterranean, which is warm all the way around. And if you see, this Black Sea is a big lake. And so Russia is directly connected. After the Crimean War, Russia is right here. If they could secure a passage from the Baltic Sea into this Aegean Sea, which is right next to Greece, they have connection right into Mediterranean. They could go through, remember the Suez Canal, they could move that way to go to this part of the world. They could move this way to go out to the rest of the world. So it's really important for Russia to have this warm water port. This was not even possible in 1815, because in 1815, Austria and the Turks were right next to each other. So the fact that both of these older empires got weaker and kind of withdrew, this gives Russia some hope that if they can, they could be able to push through. This makes sense? Now, we are in the age of empires. And the age of empires is basically colonization with industry. And so it really matters that you go to the world and you're trading around the world. And that's why Russia is wanting to do this. Okay, let me make sure that this comes up, and I'll give you a much prettier picture. This is the map. This is a lot prettier map than that one. This one, it actually makes sense. Here's our Italy. There's the boot. See, I always try to make it look like a boot. That one was a failed boot. So here's Italy. This is France, right? Here's Spain. This is North Africa. This is Greece, right? Lots of little islands. This is the Ottoman Empire. Here, this big thing here is the lake that I talked about, the Black Sea, right? It's huge, right? It's kind of like our Great Lake, so you can't see on the other side. It's a great big, and you can see how there is a land now. You can come in from water. If you're Russia here, you could get in your ships and you could go here. If you weren't having to be blocked by the Ottomans or the Austrians. When the Austrian-Hungarian Empire pulled back, it leaves Albania, Montenegro, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania. I'm not going to have you memorize all these guys. Just keep in mind that there's a bunch of them that are exposed. Similarly, the Ottomans cannot push back. They have a little bit on this side, but for the most part, they're back, and so that's what's exposed. This is where Russia wants to go. They want to go and get a warm water port. But they're not the only people in this conflict. What's happening to the rest? Here's Germany. Remember, Germany wasn't, and here I have it bigger, but it was just Prussia that's combined all the connected areas. Austria-Hungarian Empire physically is larger, but it's actually a weaker empire. It's beginning to fade. It's beginning to kind of fall apart. And so technically it's got lots of territory, but it's weak. Russia is huge, right? And Russia thinks it's really strong because Napoleon goes into Russia with 600,000 people and comes out with 40,000. So Russia takes the credit for that. You know and I know it wasn't Russia that killed Napoleon. It was the fact that there was no supplies, they froze to death, right? But nevertheless, they think that they're a big player. At the end of the Napoleonic Wars, England had taken over France and then restored the French king. And so from this point on, England and France are kind of allies, right? England is spending most of its attention looking around the world. France is mainly focusing on the continent, but they are in agreement. The only other group that really wasn't part of the Napoleonic War is Germany, because it didn't exist in 1815. Italy didn't exist in 1815. So when nationalism starts creating one country and another country, that balance of power is offset. Germany wants an excuse to redress the balance of power. That word, redress, you don't use it very often. Redress. If you think about it as in like I'm getting clothes on, what it really means is to change the situation. Redress the balance of power. To redress the balance of power. What that means is that they don't want France and England to have the final say over the order in Europe. Germany wants to be the dominant power. Germany isn't concerned about what England does in England, but in the mainland, Germany wants to be the dominant power. Who doesn't want Germany to be the dominant power? Well, England and France, right? Well, Austria doesn't, but remember, they're still brothers. Even though Austria doesn't join it, the only reason why Austria doesn't join Germany is that it's, yeah, they should be. But they all speak German. All of them, Germany and Austria, they all speak German. They have the same culture. So they're kind of like brothers. The thing is that this is the elder brother. They're resenting the fact that Germany is united, but they're not going to go against them. And Germany treats Austria the same way. You're the elder brother. You're weak. You're frail. You're weak, but you're still us. And so these guys are still combined, but they're just not politically united. Does that make sense? Okay. What about Ottoman Empire? Who has been their biggest enemy for the longest time? Yeah, no, Austria, for the longest time. But are they the biggest enemy now in 1890s? No, because Austria is weak. They're the elder guy. So the reason why we have these guys is because Austria pulled back and Ottoman pulled back. So yeah, Russia is their biggest enemy. It used to be for the longest time, Ottomans and the Austrians were fighting. But that's in the 1500s and the 1600s and the 1700s. By the time we get into the late 1800s and early 1900s, Ottoman is far more concerned with Russia. In fact, your Crimean War is really about this area. And after the Crimean War, most of these little places kind of got independence. And that's what helped this area. Russia came out on a good side of the Crimean War because it meant that they were more able to start manipulating politically, not necessarily military, they're not going to invade, but trying to encourage these people to be less loyal to Austria and more loyal to Russia. Because if they could do that, then they could have this access to the warm water port. Does that make sense? Okay. What about England?
England just wants to do what it wants to do.
What does it want to do?
Doesn't want to do?
No, what does it want to do? What does it want to do? What? But see, it's an easy way of looking at it. Like they just want to take over. But after the War of after Napoleonic Wars, how much emphasis did Britain put on the mainland area? Not very much. They would give support, like in the Crimean War, they'd help one or the other. But England isn't putting troops to the ground very much here. England is far more interested in where they are around the world. The phrase that we get in the late 1800s, this is during the imperialism, is that the sun never sets on the British Empire. What does that mean? The sun never sets on the British Empire.
The British Empire will never die. They're like it will never.
It's a very literal idea. The sun never sets on the British Empire. No matter.
There's always sun.
That's what I mean. In other words, no matter what, because the world spins.
And they're all kind of at the top, a
And
little bit at
wherever the world is having a sunset, there is a British colony. So there's a British colony out here, there's a British colony out here, there's a British colony out in Asia, there's one out in Africa, there's one in the Americas. There's British colonies say the sun never sets, what they're really saying is that the British Empire is all over the world. And technically, they were right. The sun never did set on the British Empire. Because no matter where the setting sun is, there's a British colony somewhere. This is industrialization. This is that imperialism, the industrialization, the mercantilism. They're not out there trying to take over the world. They're out there having raw resources. Everybody coming back, turning into a huge, giant trade engine. In 1900, England is clearly the strongest economic powerhouse in the world. 1900. They have one competitor who's not at all that much of a competitor. Who are we talking about? What is it? U.S. Thing is that the U.S. isn't really a competitor because the U.S. why? We have no empire. Why don't we have an empire?
We don't want one.
We don't want one. It's a very big thing. We don't do empires, right? The whole life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the reason to create our country was based on the idea that England shouldn't have had an empire over us. So we're big on the empire. Nevertheless, because we are so big on our continent and we have access from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast, we are still having a trade network all over the world. We don't say the sun never sets in the American empire because we don't have an empire. It sets after, what, about 4 hours. It's done, right?
Yeah.
So that's not what we're looking at. And we're not big on empires. We are still much more ideologically. But for UK, at home, on the island, they can be democratic and becoming increasingly democratic. But in the world, they're much more pragmatic. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the beginning.